AI is so fast, machine learning is so vast that you have its applications in almost every field. CGPA is a very crucial factor, unfortunately, but it also isn't the only thing that someone would be looking at when going through your profile. In this document is where you express your interest, your creativity, your passion to work with them. My problem statement was in machine learning and bioinformatics. And the last time I did biology was in 10th grade. The one thing I never did was look at my experience or ever think that this particular position is out of my league. I just blindly applied to every position that I came across.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of IEEE Pune's podcast Beyond Conversations. In today's episode, we are thrilled to welcome Jaskaran Singh Walia. Karan is a remarkable third-year B.Tech student at VIT Vellore, currently immersed in a research internship at Cambridge University, UK. His journey is nothing short of inspiring, having accumulated invaluable experience through diverse research internships at esteemed institutions such as IIT Kanpur and the University of Lincoln. Alongside his academic pursuits, Karan is the driving force behind Travellio, a startup that has garnered significant attention, including funding from the prestigious Microsoft Founders Hub. For many students, navigating the landscape of internships can seem like an overwhelming challenge. In this interview, Karan generously shares his insights, advice, and personal experiences, shedding light on the entire process from finding opportunities to securing them. Tune in as we delve into Karan's journey, learning from his successes, setbacks, and the invaluable lessons he's gathered along the way. Welcome to the IEEE Pune podcast, Karan. So, heading straight to the questions, why did you decide to go with AI, ML, or DS? A lot of students, when they enter into the engineering degree, they find it a little difficult to choose their particular domain. So why did you make this choice and how did you start working on it?
That's a great question. So to get started with this question, I'll be going back to my first year where I had the basic expertise of just the basic subjects and I had no clue or I didn't know much about AI and machine learning and what it was actually about. AI and machine learning at that time were just these big words that I'd heard in big fields that everyone says that, you should always pursue artificial intelligence or machine learning. But at the moment, I didn't have much knowledge of it. But today, it's been, I think, about 2.5 years since that day, and I've worked on different problem statements. And I feel like the best answer to this question would be the broad variety of multiple disciplines that AI and machine learning conquers. So AI and machine learning and data science has its applications in so many different disciplines like, let's say, healthcare, finance, medicine, automation, robotics, and much more, where we can incorporate the use of AI and machine learning to actually solve different problems across the globe. So it's the variety of disciplines, it's the broadness of the field that excites me to pursue these particular fields.
And how did you first start learning in any of the three?
So at the end of my first year, I heard through a friend that he had wrote a research paper and it was a big word for me. So I was really excited to know what a research paper was more about. It sounded really fancy to me. And so that's when I first stumbled upon the word research and what it actually does. What do you actually have to do to pursue research? And then soon later, I worked on a project and I wrote a review or like a summary paper about the project, which was then accepted into an IEEE conference. And that kind of gave me an idea of what research actually is, how you write a paper, how do you complete a project, and how do you publish it. So it gave me the basic steps through these. And all I had to do after that was just reproduce these steps, but in a different and a bigger manner than last time. And that's kind of how I got started with research. After that, I just started working on different projects, different problem statements in research and worked my way up through it.
Can you give us a little more insight into how research in AI actually looks like? What are the steps that you're talking about?
Absolutely. So the research in AI often involves experimentation with different algorithms, different data sets, and different computational models. Where the sum goal usually is to utilize some form of data to solve a problem. Now, the problem could be a novel problem. It could have some novelty where it's not been solved before, or it could also be an existing solution, just an improvement of an existing solution. So these are the main two ways to go about an AI research. And there are different ways to solve a problem. That's by using different architectures, maybe developing your own architecture, building something new, building a framework. And yeah, basically utilizing the machine learning frameworks, the AI frameworks to utilize these problems.
One of the fundamental questions that a lot of Indian students have is how do you find research opportunities at bigger institutes? And you've been a research associate at some of the top universities in Singapore and now even at Cambridge. So, how did these opportunities come about? How did you find them?
Right. So this is a really interesting question because my first research paper, as I mentioned earlier, was with my own university in VIT Chennai. And after that, I worked my way up through step by step. So the way I did that was after finishing and presenting my paper in the conference, I leveraged this experience to then apply at different research programs in India. So the one thing I never did was look at my experience or ever think that this particular position is out of my league. I just blindly applied to every position that I came across. And after doing so, I did get a couple replies from a few research programs. I was selected for Taiwan's research program called TEEP last year in 2022. And I couldn't go for that, unfortunately, because I had my college semester during that time. But fortunate enough for me, I also got selected for IIT's Surge program, IIT Kanpur's Search Research program, which happens every summer for 2 months. And luckily, because it was a summer program, I could take part in it. And that's where I got my first actual glimpse of what a research or like what an academia pursued career would feel like. Because there, I feel like I worked so extensively and so hard on our research statement that I got a taste of what this field actually is like and how it is to work here. So at the time of applying to IIT, I barely had any experience. I just had one research paper, which was also just a basic review paper. It didn't have much novelty, if I'm being honest. And apart from that, I didn't have much internship experience as well. I did have just one internship under my name, which was online for a couple of months. We just had to finish a project for a smart lab. So using the current profile that I had, which wasn't much, I applied to different programs and got through IIT. And then for the next 3 months, I worked with IIT on their problem statement, which was again quite fascinating because it was completely out of my domain. My problem statement was in machine learning and bioinformatics. And the last time I did biology was in 10th grade. So it had been 3 years it had been 3 years since I tried to study biology, and it had been a while, but the entire first month of my research was just getting myself thorough with the biology background, so I could then incorporate machine learning solutions into what problem statement we had to work with. So that was another journey for me. And as I said, AI is so fast, machine learning is so vast that you have its applications in almost every field. So, and after I finished my research at IIT, I also received the Best Poster Award for my presentation in IIT out of all the participants. And after that, I leveraged my experience with IIT and also a couple other internships I did after this to then apply to Cambridge. And then that's how I got into Cambridge.
Right. So I think one of the points that you spoke about, never think of your profile as too tiny and never think of any opportunity like it's completely out of your league. I think that's a mistake that a lot of students make. It's very easy to feel like this is way beyond my capacities.
A lot of my friends also say that, oh, there's no point if I apply to this particular company, like let's say Google or Microsoft, because they're too huge and I don't have any set of experiences enough to apply for these companies. Or it's always like, I cannot apply to these institutions for research because I don't have any research background. But I always tell everyone to just blindly apply to places. Make sure you're putting yourself out there, you're putting your profile out there, and just blindly apply. Because especially in research, your prior experience and your academic scores like CGPA is always a plus point. But at the end of the day, what really matters is your curiosity, your passion for research, how much you're willing to put into your problem statement and work on your research. Because with any research problem or with any research statement, it is very likely that for an undergraduate student, it is probably the first time you're working with that particular problem statement, right? And it's something that's out of your expertise. So either way is based on your prior knowledge, even if it's related to your prior knowledge or not, we are all going to start somewhere, right? So it's going to be a new topic even for someone with prior knowledge and even for someone with no research background. So more than your prior expertise and your profile, what really matters is as I said, your passion towards the particular field and how much you're able to put in and how much you like the subject and like working with it.
How did you find these opportunities? Like, were you actively going and visiting their websites or cold mailing professors, or was it just using your LinkedIn? How did you find these particular opportunities?
So each university across the globe has their own research programs. Almost all of them do. And usually the applications for these programs open up between the months of December and February. These are for the summer research programs that take place between the months of May to August for most of the institutions. So the one way to go about pursuing research in other universities and international universities like University of Cambridge or National University of Singapore, one way of going about this would be to apply through their programs. So each of their websites have details on when the program application opens, what they require for applications, like most of them require you to have letter of recommendations. They also require you to submit your CGPA, your academic transcripts, and all of these details. And the other way to go about this would be through cold mailing professors throughout different universities. Now, there's no time frame regarding this, since in this method, you'd mostly be working remotely from wherever you are, right? But there's no time frame regarding when you need to apply for this, because you could just cold mail a professor any time of the year, put yourself out there, display your profile and explain your willingness to work with them. And if they have a slot or if they require an intern, then get back to you and you could work on something with that particular university. So there are these two ways to go about it. When it comes to applying through different programs, as I said, it opens up around November and February. It opens up around November and February of the year, and the applications open up for summers. There are a couple research programs that certain countries follow, where basically there's a research portal, which contains different projects and problem statements from different companies or labs. And you could also apply to these. For example, there's MyTax from Canada. There's A-Star, there's SIPCA A-Star from Singapore. And there's a lot of other similar programs that each country has where you can apply and then an institution can pick your profile and work with you on a project.
You mentioned that you do have to submit some details in order to, let them understand your profile. What are some key components that you should be working on while submitting your profile?
So usually most of these applications require for your resume. Although it's best practice to submit your academic CV instead of resume. I'll get to that towards the end of this. Additionally, apart from your resume, you also require documents like letter of recommendations sometimes. They also ask you a research statement of interest, which is basically a one-page document of you explaining why would you like to pursue research with them, or why would you like pursuing that particular topic with them and what interests you in that topic. And in this document is where you express your interest, your creativity, your passion to work with them, and these particular factors. Apart from these, you also require your transcripts and your CGPA to be submitted at the time of applying. Now, CGPA is a very crucial factor. A lot of people ask me this. CGPA is a very crucial factor, unfortunately, but it also isn't the only thing that someone would be looking at when going through your profile. So as I said, even if you do not have a very solid CGPA or a very strong CGPA, you still have really good chances to get through research applications based on your creativity, your passion, and your prior work. So you would also be asked to submit your transcripts as a proof of your CGPA. And I think, that's about it. These are the main documents that you'd be requiring while submitting your research applications.
And you do write a lot on LinkedIn in terms of how to improve your resume or your academic CV, how to build these documents so that, they will be picked among the thousands of resumes or CVs that are being submitted. Can you give us some insight into that?
Absolutely. So recently I've been working on my startup and I put up a job posting because we required a couple of interns to work along us. And a startup with, this was a startup that nobody has heard of, right? Because it just came up a couple months back. And in a day, we got about 1,500 applications. Now, what I'm trying to say here is if a startup like this that doesn't have any recognition can get these many amount of applications, then you can't even imagine how much a big company like Microsoft or any other companies that put up job postings on LinkedIn get. The amount of applications is huge. So now the thing is, nobody is going to go through each and every resume, each and every profile that has applied to their job posting. So it's different when it comes to research, and it's different when it comes to industrial internships. So for companies, for the industrial internship side, what companies usually do is that they have an ATS scanner. An ATS scanner is basically, let's say, an artificial intelligence, let's call it a robot that takes your resume and it validates if this candidate is actually beneficial to us for this particular posting. Now, what it does is it gives you a score, it gives your resume a score, and it gives everyone's resume a score. And then it checks if your score crosses the cutoff score. If your score does cross the cutoff, then you get selected to the next stage, which might be a coding round or which might be an interview, right? But if you do not make it through the ATS, your profile automatically gets declined even without anyone saying it. Now, there's a lot of things that ATS considers that one person might not include in their resume. Like, let's say, for example, numbers. Numbers are really important to make you go through the ATS. Numbers is basically quantifying what you did. Instead of saying that I increased company revenues, if you phrase it like I increased 15% of revenues of the company, it makes a big difference for the ATS, even though it might not be a big difference for us. Apart from these, there are also other key factors that ATS reads specifically in resumes pertaining to each role and pertaining to which job profile you're applying to. So tips and tricks to get through the ATS is one. And then there's also tips to improve your resume after you get through the ATS for the job manager or for the HR to read your resume and shortlist you. So you got to make sure that you check the checkboxes for both of these, where you make sure that your resume also gets through the ATS and also gets through the HR. And there's a lot of key factors when it comes to this. One practice is also by keeping separate resumes for different job posts. So, for example, if someone is interested in consultancy, let them have one separate resume for that, and let's say a separate resume if you're interested in data science as well, right? So it's a good practice to keep different resumes for different job posts and only highlight the relevant experiences in that resume that you're applying to that job post. So if I'm applying for an artificial intelligence intern, I'm not going to include my positions of responsibility or my consultancy roles or experience in that particular resume, right? And one more thing is, I'd like to ask you this. Do you have an idea of how much time usually is given per resume when looking upon a resume for a job? Do you have any idea of how much time they give per resume when looking at a resume?
I really doubt it's any higher than a minute.
It is pretty surprising, and you can look this up on Google, but it is actually 6 seconds. So an average time given to a resume is 6 seconds for any job posting. So you got to make sure you have to display everything that you have done in your life, in your work experience within that 6 seconds. So that's the trick. And so this is all concerning to the industrial internships part. When it comes to academia, it's a total different case though. In the case of research and academia, there is no ATS present in the middle. So it's usually your mentor or your professor or someone at a lab going through your resume without the use of an ATS. And so in this case, it is much more preferable to use an academic CV instead of a resume. So what exactly is an academic CV? It's a more explained version of your resume where you highlight what you did, the objective of your problem statement, the results of your problem statement, and the methodology of what you worked on with your prior experience. And you can also include additional things into this, like your academic achievements, your research publications, and you can your awards, your competitions won, and you can include a lot of more detail into this academic CV than you would in a resume. And apart from this, you would also explain each and every project or research that you have worked on in a more descriptive manner in an academic CV, which is not being done in a resume. So this can give your mentor or professor or whoever's looking at the CV a more detailed idea about what you actually do. Right, and it's a really good practice to highlight your research experience, your journal publications, conference publications in such a type of a CV.
I think that gives us, a lot of food to think about, food for thought. But like you said, there are some check boxes that you really should be marking when you are looking at, submitting a resume. How do you personally tick those check boxes? Does it depend for every organization? And how do you decide, what are some key points that you want to include?
Absolutely. So it all depends on which organization and which role am I applying to. So if it's going to be a big organization, if it's going to be a big company, let's say a Fortune company, I would make sure to have a different resume for that, because I know it's going to go through an ATS scanner because there's going to be a lot of applicants to it. So I'd have a different resume for that. When it comes to startups and research-oriented roles, I tend to have a different resume for those, because I know they're not going to have that a huge amount of applications, and it might be a better practice to just portray myself in more words in that case. Right. So that's usually what I do for startups and research. And there's an additional step that you can take when it comes to, let's say, research or startups, and it would be to actually mail people working there. Right, so you can drop a mail to them, you can drop a cold mail telling them expressing your interest in their company and why you'd like to work there and how you are a right fit for their role. And a lot of times you do get replies. I usually schedule my mails at 8 a.m. So I get replies in the middle of the day, and usually people do reach out to you, and it's a good practice to also reach out to the company that you're applying to by cold mailing them.
But I mean, a lot of people stumble with what do I say in the mail? I'm one of 100 applicants, and I mean, what would you exactly be speaking about when you're cold mailing someone in a way that catches their attention and helps them to think that, okay, this might be a right fit?
That's a good question. So usually when you're going about cold mailing someone, instead of putting your profile out there, or instead of putting my profile out there and saying, hey, this is my work experience, this is what I've done, let me know if you're interested to work. This is the usual way of going about cold mailing. But I think it's pretty outdated, because you're not telling them what you can offer to them, right? So instead, what you can do is when you're cold mailing someone, it's best to first tell them what you can offer them, right? How you can help them. If it's a company, how can you help the company? Let's say you cold mail them saying that I have this expertise in web development, and I feel like I can add a blog section to your website, or I can add a FAQ section to your website, and it would really be helpful for your website if you let me work on this. So one thing would be to obviously tell them what you offer, and then give your profile and your expertise and what you have done in the past. When it comes to research cold mailing, when it comes to cold mailing professors for research or different universities for research, I'd follow a similar approach where I first mention why their profile, am I writing a cold mail to them particularly, because you need to make sure all of your mails are personalized. If you write a generalized mail and send it to 100 different people, they are probably not going to read it. And it's not that hard to tell if your mail is generalized or personalized, right? So first thing would be write personalized mails to whoever you're cold mailing, right? When it comes to professors in academia, the best way would be to first tell them why are you mailing them in particular instead of other faculties that you could have approached. So for me, I usually mention their publications that stood out the most for me, and if it aligns with what I work on. So let's say, for example, I go through faculty list from a university, and I find out a couple professors that I'm keen on working with. I would go through their publications, and then in the mail I would mention that, hey, I went through these publications of yours, and they really piqued my interest, and what you do is really aligning with what I work with. This is what I've done in the past. And if there's any existing problem statements that you are working on or you require students to work on, you can always consider my profile right now or in the future to work with you on this. So that's one way of going about it. Although networking is a really, really important factor when it comes to cold mailing, because if your mail is referred through someone, or if you can use someone's name that, hey, I got your mail through this professor and they suggested me to mail you regarding this problem statement. So that's going to give you a credibility. That's going to give you like an endorsement coming from someone, right? And networking is really important. That's also how I got my internship at Cambridge. I didn't just cold mail directly. So one of my research papers got accepted in a conference that was being held in University of Cambridge. And this paper I had worked on with a faculty from University of Lincoln, which is also in the UK. So after that, after our paper got selected for Cambridge, I decided not to go to Cambridge to present my paper because I thought it would have been, because it's quite expensive because it was self-funded, right? So I thought it would be better not to go and let my professor present the paper for me at Cambridge. But then this is what my professor told me. He's like, it's not the paper presentation that you're coming for, it's actually the networking in the conference, because it was a really good conference. So it's the different professors from different universities, it's different working individuals. There were also a lot of founders there of big companies across UK. So he mentioned it's the networking that's more important than, let's say, only the paper presentation. And then I understood the weight of what that actually meant. And before coming, what I did was I started finding out professors that I'd like to work with in University of Cambridge, made a whole list, and after that I wrote personalized mails to each professor stating that, hey, I'd be coming to Cambridge on this date to this date, I'd be here for 6 days, and apart from my presentation date, I'd be free to have a talk with you on these particular dates between this timing. And then I also shared my profile. I'm like, hey, I've worked on these problem statements. I've worked with IIT before. I've worked with these companies as an intern. And I really like your work in this particular paper. And I'd like to work further with you. So since I'm already coming there, you have an opportunity. We can have an opportunity to have a talk, or you can interview me or get to know more about each other, right? And that's how, with a reply ratio of 7 to 8%, I think I got 6 replies from this, out of which 6 out of about 90. Yeah, so that's a huge number. 90 is a huge number, but those 6 replies were more worth than anything, right? And usually that's the response rate you get on cold mails. It's pretty much between 8 to 10% usually, from what I've observed. And it was also during the time of vacation, so most of the professors were not available and most of the professors were not up for any meetings. But I did get 6 professors who were available in Cambridge, and I had scheduled interviews with all of them, among which I got selected into, and I finally chose one to work with, and now I'm working with the University of Cambridge remotely from India.
I recently talked with one of the engineers at Google who also had a couple of really interesting research experiences across the USA and the UK's. And he spoke about at Google, they have quite a saturation of the kind of profiles that they receive for AI and ML engineering. And what he spoke about was that a lot of people work on AI ML projects that are very, very generic and there's no standout. You'd rather work on something like DevOps rather than, make a very general AI ML template resume out of the projects that are so freely available on the internet. So how do you build a standout AI ML profile?
Absolutely. So the thing is, when people are applying to internships or job placement offers and things like these, what they tend to keep in mind is, it's a good practice to have more number of projects in my resume. It's a good practice to have my GitHub filled with projects. But what people do not seem to realize is you also need to have a good quality of projects. It's not just the quantity that matters, but you also need to have a really good quality of different variety of projects. So if you're putting up something like cat and dog detection using TensorFlow or something like this, it's probably not going to add much weight on your profile, right? So that's one reason why I chose research, because research usually gives you novel problem statements. You're probably going to work on something that hasn't been done before, or something that's upcoming and needs improvements, and you're improving a previously existing architecture, right? So in that way, research projects do give you an edge over other normal basic projects when it comes to AI and ML. And it's also that research projects are probably going to be much different from your basic, let's say, stock prediction or animal detection or something like that people usually put up on their resumes. And that's one reason why I also chose to pursue research, because it's not only going to help you in academia, in research, but it will also give your profile a good boost when it comes to applying to industrial internships.
Right. It will hold a lot of weightage in terms of that specific problem statement and the impact that it overall created.
Exactly. And it's also good practice to always have an impact of your project. Like at the end of completion, who did your project help? Was it just on your GitHub, or did it actually help a company increase their revenues or automate your company's workflow pipeline, or is it just on your GitHub? So the impact of your project is also important. When it comes to research, the impact can be measured in terms of paper views or citations, or citations and paper views. But when it comes to industrial projects that you've worked on, whether it's deployed on cloud, whether it's currently being used as a service in a company, whether you have automated something for a company. So things like these, the impact of the project is also important.
How do you manage time between cold emailing people with a personalized message to everyone, actually carrying out your projects, also pursuing college at the same time? How do you manage your time and how does it work out for you at the end of the day?
So one thing I'm going to be frank with, and I do not suggest this to anyone, I do not condone this, but my attendance at college is 10%, less than 10%. Because my college has a rule that if your CGPA is above 9, you don't have an attendance criteria. So usually it's 75, but in my case it's 0. And usually the people with the 9 plus CGPA have a really strong attendance because they like going to college and they like studying. But in my case, it's the total opposite. I did not. So I barely go to college. And most of the time, I am working on different projects, working on different research at home. And in my free time is when I quickly finish up the course material and the coursework for college. So it's kind of the other way around for me. And that is also how I've worked and gotten a lot of research experience as well as work experience right now, where I've worked with 5 different countries internationally. And I've also worked with a lot of global institutions, top 100 institutions, on different research statements.
You also mentioned your startup. Can you tell us more about what your startup is working on right now?
Absolutely. So, in the vacation that our college gave us, in the last vacation, I had an idea of working on this one startup that uses AI to integrates AI and helps travelers across the globe meet each other and travel together. So basically, I got this idea when I went to Cambridge for my research presentation, and it was a solo trip for me. And it was the first time I was traveling international. I was traveling solo internationally, and I really did not know anyone in UK. I didn't have friends or family there, so it was like a complete new place to me. And I thought it would have been nice if there was like an app that lets you meet other international travelers and network around with them, right? So, and that's where I formulated this particular idea. And then me and a couple of my friends, we formed a team. Uh, and we formed up a team to work on this problem statement. And now, yeah, we're almost done building the MVP. And the next step would be pitching to investors. But yeah, it's going so far so good. We also receive funding from Microsoft for Microsoft for Starters and Founders Hub, where we received a really good amount of funding for cloud applications, OpenAI credits, Azure credits, and a lot of other enterprises.
That's really huge. How did that happen? The funding part?
We just, after we formulated an idea, we created a design of our app, we started working on our app, and then we applied to different research funds that are out there. One of them is Microsoft Starters for Founders Hub. And after we applied, we gave in a description about our startup, and then, we got through.
You do write a lot on LinkedIn. How has LinkedIn helped you? And do you actively, make it a point to put out content on LinkedIn?
I do try my best to put out content, but after a point, you just reach this level of saturation where you're out of content. And that's been happening to me for the past couple of weeks, where I'm just brainstorming every morning, what can I post today? And I'm out of ideas. So it's like initially it's pretty easy to get up a couple posts on LinkedIn, get good reach. But then the longer you go, the harder it gets. And consistency is obviously the key to increase your audience, to increase your reach. But to also be consistent, you need to have good content to share on LinkedIn, which is the problem. But one thing I'd like to say is it's really easy to crack the LinkedIn algorithm. Like when compared to Instagram or other social medias, LinkedIn is very easy to increase your reach, network. It's much easier to increase your reach and network and increase impressions of your post. The reason I'm saying this is because I tried this one little experiment that I did on my profile. So I have this one exact same post phrased differently in two different ways. So I had it phrased in the first way, which got me about 5,000 impressions, under 50 likes, and like probably negligible comments. And the same post, phrased in a different way, the exact same post, phrased in a different way, gave me 550,000 impressions with thousands of likes and I think over 3,000 comments. So in LinkedIn, it's all about how you phrase your content and how you phrase what you're putting out there, right? And it's really easy. It's not that hard to crack the algorithm and increase your posts and your content's reach on LinkedIn.
Coming to the last question, what are some of your top resources to learn from? Nowadays, if you're a student and you're going out on the internet, there's so much of content that you can consume and learn from. It's a little bit confusing what you should actually be referring to. So what are some of your resources that you head to first?
That's a really good question, because this is something I get asked quite often in different forms. Sometimes it's, hey, I need to start learning this topic. What is the best website or the course to go about this, right? My answer to these questions are usually, most of the time is usually the same. What I feel like a lot of students get stuck in the analysis paralysis, which basically means you are giving too much time towards analyzing something instead of actually putting time to solve the problem, right? So you're stuck in the paralysis of just analyzing a problem. So the thing is, let's say you get someone gets a project opportunity, right? And if that doesn't fall under their umbrella of expertise, the first step that a person might take would be to learn a course that explains the topic of what they need to work on, or maybe go to YouTube and take up a free tutorial from YouTubers, right? That is a good way to go about it, but personally, I feel like you should take an imbalanced approach when you want to learn a new topic. And what I mean by that is people usually say you need to take a balanced approach between learning different courses and applying what you've learned, right? I feel like that's completely wrong. I feel like you should take a very imbalanced approach where you should learn something and you should spend more than double of the time on trying to apply it. So the thing with this is, in my case at least, I learn a lot by making mistakes. Every time I fail, every time I make a mistake, I learn something out of it, right? And that's what I believe is better in the long term than taking up a course that I might forget in a couple months. And it's also that courses are really long, in my opinion, and my attention span cannot last throughout the span of the course. So what I prefer doing is, if I want to learn something new, like for example, for my research at Cambridge, I had to learn more about the topic of continual learning. Continual learning is basically lifelong learning where you don't need to update the model. The machine learning model updates itself. So it's kind of like, not exactly reinforcement. It's updating itself. So let's say there's an automated driving model and it is trained on sunny data and it's trained on sunny morning and night data. But this one day there's an unexpected sandstorm or there's super heavy rains, and the model will not be able to identify what it is. So that would be the case of a normal model. But when it comes to continual learning, the model sees that this particular scenario is outside what it knows, and then it takes in the scenario as an input, retrains itself, and now it knows what rain is. So that's basically how continual learning works. And before I got started, I had very basic experience in continual learning. I didn't know much. So to learn more, instead of taking up courses, I do suggest YouTube tutorials always help out for me because they're like short and informative. It's like 30 minutes and it gives me the entire gist of whatever I need to work on, right? YouTube tutorials. And what I do suggest is always work on different projects, read codes, try to understand what's going on in a code. So if I need to learn to do this project, I would look up similar projects that have already been done on, let's say, GitHub or Kaggle or different code sources. And then I would read through the code and try to understand what's going on. So instead of taking a course, what I'd do is try to reproduce the results of an existing solution or something that does something similar. Use that as a base, read what's going on there, understand what they're doing in their code, and then formulate how I'm going to go about doing my project.
You'd call it reverse engineering of something that's already existing.
Exactly. So it's like reverse engineering my own problem or my solution, right? And in my case, it's just that I tend to learn way better than making mistakes and learning from that, learning in the process of trial and error, than just blindly looking at a course and making notes and never going through those notes again. That's not my work style. So I'd say the best way to learn a topic or the best way to build a project is to try it out. The best way to learn something is to build projects in that particular field. Even if you don't know it that well, just try to understand what you're doing. And once you're going through a piece of code and trying to understand what is happening in there, obviously there's going to be a lot of bits and pieces that you won't understand. But next, when you go through a YouTube tutorial after this, or like the mini course on this, then you'd understand each and every part and you'll remember, oh, this part of code that I didn't understand, that's what's happening here. So you have something to compare from. Whereas if you're just going through courses or tutorials, you'd just blindly be making notes, in my opinion. And that, personally, for me, hasn't worked the best. So the best way to learn, in my opinion, would be to apply your expertise, or even if you don't know, just try to build a project, try to know what's happening in a code. If you completely are new to the field, then try reading through existing architectures, existing codes, or similar problems that people have solved, and try going through that. And that's the best way to learn for me.
Right, that's a very unique approach. And the first time I've heard of, going the other way around and how it may help students. So thanks a lot for doing this interview with us. And
Absolutely.
I'm sure that all your advice has provided a lot of insight into the tech community to look into.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode. If you found it valuable, I kindly ask you to share it with others who may benefit from it. I highly recommend subscribing to our channel and exploring our other podcasts, all designed to support the student community. Additionally, make sure to visit the description for important links that will connect you with us. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Wishing you a wonderful day ahead.